Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third week guest talks in EVO, Language Assessment Literacy for Practitioners. On our Canvas platforms, there are a lot of discussions going on. We really enjoy reading about it. And of course, we also participate. We try to answer them as much as we can. Today, the theme for this week is the assessment of productive skills. And we already have talked about speaking and writing a lot on our Canvas platform, but today we have Atta Gebril with us to give a presentation on assessment of writing. So before, I know that you cannot wait for it, but before that, I'd like to leave the floor to Thomais and Sophia, our guest experts, and they will be making a very short introduction. So Thomais, Sophia, over to you.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. So it's been a pleasure to be here with you. I'm going to start with Mr. Atta's presentation. Atta Gebril is professor and director of the TESOL program at the Department of Applied Linguistics at the American University in Cairo. He obtained his PhD in foreign language and ESL education with a minor in language testing from the University of Iowa. And he previously worked for American College Testing, where he was part of the Workies team. In addition, he has been working as an assessment and evaluation consultant and currently serves on the TOEFL Committee of Examiners. His research interests include integrated writing assessment, assessment literacy, and test validation. And now Thomais will tell us more about Dr. Atta's activities. Thomais.
Okay, thank you, Sophia. So, Atta Gebril serves on the editorial boards of Language Assessment Quarterly, Assessing Writing, and TESOL Journal. In January 2019, he joined the Language Assessment Quarterly editorial team as an associate editor. His book entitled Assessment Myths, co-authored with Leah Plakans, was published by the University of Michigan Press in 2015. His book, Learning Orienting Language Assessment, was published by Routledge in 2021. And in 2018, he won the best article in the field of language testing, award from the International Language Testing Association. So I think a lot of things you've done. A well-known presenter and academic. So we gladly welcome Atta Gebril to EVO 2022.
Thank you, everyone, for the nice introduction. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for your kind invitation. And I'm really happy to be with such a wonderful group of professionals. And I'd like you actually to commend you on such an interesting project and also a project that would have substantial impact on language assessment practices worldwide. So I truly like what you guys are doing with that project. Thank you very much. And as you all know, let me first share my slides and then we'll start the presentation. As you know, the title of my presentation is Classroom Writing Assessment, Practices, Challenges, and Possibilities. And to give you a sense of the issues that I'll be talking about, here's the outline. I'll start with some discussions of the nature of writing assessment. Then I'll talk about the context of writing assessment in different instructional settings. And I'll talk a little bit about task design. I'll talk about scoring/feedback. As you know, that we're talking about classroom assessment. So I think feedback is very relevant in that context. And I'll end up with some comments about the role of technology in writing assessment and L2 writing in general. And I thought it would be interesting to talk first about the nature of writing assessment. And since this week you'll be discussing productive skills, most of the issues I'll be discussing on this slide are relevant within the context of speaking assessment or performance assessment in general. If we look at the slide here, we have the writing score. This is what we're really interested in. We're interested in assessing writing ability of our test takers or students. And but the question that we usually have, does this score reflect only writing ability or other variables? And unfortunately, these variables, whether we like them or not, they're there within the assessment context in terms of the personal characteristics of the students, the task itself that we're giving to our students, test administration conditions, raters, and in a classroom assessment context, the teacher usually works as the rater. So you have experienced raters, but also you have novice raters. You have raters with training, with familiarity with the type of scoring criteria we're using. Some teachers don't have enough background info about the rating process itself, and as a result, that might cause some as what we call measurement error. And also you have the scoring rubric and you have the writing mode or genre. Most of these variables, if not all of them, could contribute to the writing score in addition to the writing ability. What we usually do as part of writing assessment, we try our best to mitigate the effects of these variables, and hopefully the score that we'll eventually get would mostly reflect the writing ability of students or examinees. And this is a very important issue that we need to pay attention to within the context of writing assessment. Even if we're interested in tapping into writing ability as part of this process, other variables might contribute to the writing score, and we would try our best to make sure that, you know, they don't have substantial impact on the final score of the examinee or the student within a classroom assessment context. And before moving on, I really like the work that the British Council does with the different skills. So we'll spend probably 3-4 minutes watching this clip, basically because it would summarize most of the issues that I'll be talking about today. And I hope you like it, because I really like it.
While many people write every day, either as part of their job or as a hobby, for others, it's a distant memory of school days. Then again, it depends what we mean by write, doesn't it? It's true that we don't write many letters these days, but we do write things like emails, texts, and social media posts all the time. So maybe the kind of writing we do is changing, but most of us still write quite a lot. When we write, there's a lot happening. We think about the topic and the way we need to make the message work. We also think about the audience we're hoping will read our ideas. Meanwhile, we're forming a mental structure of the piece, as well as choosing suitable vocabulary. And of course, we put it all into a grammatically appropriate form so that the reader can make sense of exactly what we're trying to get across. All this passes down from the brain to the hand or fingers, where the message magically appears. When we want to assess someone's ability to write, we should ask them to write something, but not just anything. The sort of writing task we set should be related to the decisions we plan to make about the person based on the work they produce. We must also take into consideration what we know about the test takers. There's little point in asking teenagers to write a business letter. We'll never know if the reason for their bad performance is due to poor writing ability or to lack of experience of business writing. In the real world, we write quite a few different kinds of things. So, if we want to know about learners' overall writing ability, we really need to ask them to write a range of different things. We also need to think about how much writing is needed. For example, it's much easier to write a short note than a long essay. And we need to think about the audience, because we use very different language to write to a friend than when writing to our boss. Of course, there are lots of other things to consider when making a test. We don't need to go into all that now. When the tasks have been agreed and people have written what we've asked them to write, we need to award a score. In large-scale tests, this is done by people who've been trained and accredited. In small-scale classroom tests, it's usually done by teachers who rely on their own experience to get it right. Scoring is done using a rating scale. The scale can be global or holistic, where a single number or grade is awarded, or it can be analytic, where separate scores or grades are awarded for different aspects of the work. For example, grammatical accuracy or range of vocabulary. It's very important that the descriptions in the scale represent the kind of things that are relevant to the decisions we plan to make. So, asking the rater to consider the precision of the language in a personal email from one teenager to another is not such a good idea, since this type of writing is typically very casual. There have been some interesting innovations recently in the way writing is scored, with a number of exam boards using computer scoring programs to complement the work of human raters. We can look forward to seeing more and more of this over the coming years. On the surface, assessing writing ability seems pretty straightforward. Just ask people to write something and then give what they write a score. In fact, it's a lot more complicated than that, especially the scoring side. However, if we think systematically about as many of the things mentioned here as possible, then at least we can be certain that our tests are appropriate, fair, and accurately scored.
Okay. What do you think? What are the issues that were raised in that probably 4 or 5 minute clip? Things that probably we'll be talking about today. Let's see. You can write. I mean, you don't have to talk, but you can just send your comments in the chat box. Issues that you're expecting, and issues that, as I said, were raised in the clip that we just watched. The style, so basically we're talking about scoring criteria, and this is one of the issues that we'll be talking about. Yes. The question is, what type of issues that have been discussed in that clip that we watched? It seems you guys, you're talking about a paper in Google Scholar, right? It's a different issue that the one that I'm seeing in the chat box. So some of the issues that, as you've seen in the clip, they talked about the scoring criteria, but also they talked about the nature of writing assessment. They talked about the task design issues that we need to pay attention to. And by the end of the clip, they talked about the role of technology in assessing writing. And these are the issues that I'll be talking about today in terms of classroom writing assessment. And let me start with this. The context itself, sorry, oops. Not sure what happened. pages.
Perhaps you should press escape, the escape button.
Yeah, and keep pressing skip. Let me go back. Here you go. Yes. Here you go. So one of the issues that we need to consider when we're thinking about designing a writing test, we need to understand the context. We need to understand the instructional setting from which we're collecting data, how it looks like, what type of writing courses we're teaching, what type of writing task we're teaching. And then, why do we need a writing assessment? It would be useful to get to know some of the decisions you usually make as based on writing scores within your context. How many of you are working in a university setting, just to get a sense of the type of writing courses you're currently teaching? Do you work in a university setting or a high school setting? I mean, I'd like to know more about the type of writing courses you're involved in. If you want to talk, please go ahead. If you want to write in the chat box, please do. University, okay. How about the other colleagues? University, any high school teachers here? IELTS instruction, okay, university level, university, European Commission, somebody wrote in Greek. Translation, please. University, great. So, okay, we'll spend, since it seems that most, okay, for a language school, high school, okay. So we have a combination of university level language professionals and also high school teachers, private school teaching. Okay. Why do you need writing assessment? What type of decisions usually you make based on writing exams? Any thoughts? Okay, you're teaching Greek. Okay, got it. Productive skills are not tested, right? Or are tested. So do you make placement decisions based on a, let's talk about assessment in general. So you give a test. Is it only for summative purposes by the end of the course, or you use assessment also for other, for making other decisions? Subject-based, okay. So mainly it's an achievement test. Okay. Formative purposes as well. Great. So 4 skills need to be tested. Achievement, again. Great. So basically, when you try to consider designing a writing test, you need to ask yourself, what type of decisions I'll be making based on this exam? Will be used for formative purposes, would be used for placement, for making placement decisions, for making probably diagnostic type of, or collecting some sort of diagnostic information. So based on the objective of the, or based on the decision you'll be eventually making, you need to pay attention to some of the writing features you'll be including on this writing assessment tool. Also, you need to think about your students in terms of gender, in terms of age, in terms of proficiency, experience with writing tasks in general, what type of writing activities they're usually involved in, and weaknesses and strength. For example, if you're working with younger kids, probably the type of tasks that we'll be using with kids would be relatively different from the tasks we'll be using with university students, as we'll be talking about later. In terms of age, or in terms of gender, can you think of topics that probably would be probably put male students in a sort of advantage versus female students? Or is it something that you don't pay attention to? Or is it something you think that it's not relevant when you're assigning a writing prompt to students? What do you think? Any thoughts on this? Okay, Tamari, go ahead. You raised your hand, right?
Yes, I prefer to be like talking because I have like so not very good ability of writing, and at the same time because of my like broken hand. But still, anyway, for us it's very important to consider our like students' age, proficiency, at the same time their requirements. For example, if I have like IELTS instruction course, and the the writing will be to assess, and essay part is the most important. That's why it depends on my students' needs. If they want like to receive the highest score in the writing assignment, I should be focusing on improving and on like on students' achievement. But of course, for me, I am university level teacher, and so lecturer, and mostly teach writing, business communication, and of course, writing for business is different skill. And I mostly deal with adult learners for whom they really want to develop actually. And this is like people cannot be just born as a good writers, business writers. So this skill is learnable. It needs to be nurtured and learned and developed. That's my viewpoint. And at the same time, when I'm teaching this business writing, students, of course, they are prepared that they need to develop. Because there are some students who have a good writing skill in their native language, but still a good writer of a business, this is like a not an innate skill. So this is a kind of like a learnable. That's what I want to make like show the difference when students like they need to be aware of this. That's my viewpoint.
Thank you. Thank you. And other colleagues mentioned age, and probably background info would be relevant here. And another colleague, I think, Tomias, am I pronouncing the name correctly? Okay, so in high stakes exams, we have many times take into consideration the age of our students, even though they take the test to attain. Okay, so age again, and have another comment that age is more relevant than gender when deciding on writing activities. Great. Okay, so let's move on. The other issue that we need to consider is the construct. What type of skills we're tapping into? For example, Tamari mentioned business writing as a construct. Some other colleagues might be working with general writing skills. So the tasks that we'll be giving to business writing students would be relatively different from the tasks that we'll be giving for general writing purposes, for academic writing. And I'll have some examples later on about the type of academic writing activities that we usually use within a writing assessment context. And since we're talking about classroom assessment, so the learning outcomes, the course objectives, the focus or the content we're covering within the class would affect our selection of writing activities to be eventually included within our writing exam. However, if we're interested in designing a proficiency exam, which is not the objective or the focus of the current presentation, so probably the construct will be theory-based. So you'll be moving from a theoretical framework to an assessment framework based on a specific theoretical perspective. But for classroom purposes, usually we try to draw on the learning outcomes or the course objectives or the focus of the or the nature of the content we're covering in this class to decide on the writing activities to be included on the test. Okay. Then, three main issues that we're really interested in when it comes, not only when it comes to writing assessment, but also speaking assessment, given the fact that both of them, you know, they're classified under productive skills or what we call performance assessment. Usually in a performance assessment context, you have the task, And then based on the task, we get the performance. So the performance is elicited based on a specific task. Within the context of writing assessment, this is a writing task. Within the context of speaking assessment, it would be a speaking task. Then we will have the performance. And given the fact that scoring of performance assessment in general and scoring of writing is relatively subjective, and you don't have only one correct skill as objective as we do in objective items. You need a scoring method, and you need to pay attention to the scoring procedures. Probably need to come up with a scoring rubric that would help you quantify the ability or the performance elicited based on this task. And I'll be spending probably the next 30 minutes talking about these three areas. Okay. One thing that you need to consider when you're when deciding on a specific writing task, you need to ask yourself at the beginning, what type of resources do I have? And resources in terms of time, resources in terms of space, financial or human resources. Why are these issues important? Basically because, I mean, if you have 3 hours versus having 1 hour, it would be relatively different in terms of the number of writing activities or writing tasks you can include on the test. Again, for having 3 activities or 3 tasks, you might need a lot of time in terms of scoring. So if you need to send a report to students within a week or 2, you need to make sure that you have a sufficient number of raters. And that's why we have what we call human resources. So how many raters you would need? Then how about financial resources needed in terms of paying raters or probably making copies for or preparing an exam sheet or paying for people who would be helping with test administration. So these are the issues that you need to consider, and you need to ask yourself and think carefully about the resources you have in terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of and also in terms of human resources. Once you decide on the resources you have, there are a number of issues. So you're moving now to the task itself. There are a number of issues that you need to consider when designing a writing task. Well, the topic. We talked earlier about the fact that sometimes it's the topic itself is too technical and might require some background info. So the topic that you'll be giving within a context of business writing would be relatively different from the topic you would be giving in an academic setting, or even within an academic setting. Probably the topic you'll be giving to students from the sciences would be relatively different from the topic they would be giving to students from the social sciences, because at the end of the day, we need to meet. Remember earlier, the first slide when we talked about the nature of writing assessment, and we said, well, there are certain variables that we need to mitigate their effect on writing ability or writing score or writing performance. And that's why you need to make sure that students have enough background info about the topic. So if students cannot write about a specific topic, it should not be because they don't have background info. They were not able to write basically because the writing ability is not up to the expected level. If they were not, the students did not actually perform as expected. So it should, it has to do with the writing ability, not with background info about the topic. So that's very important. The instructions, you need to give quality instructions to the students, and I'll share some examples later. In terms of the stimuli we'll be using just a written statement or using pictures. Our colleague talked about business writing. They use tables sometimes, or graphs, or flow chart. So what type of stimuli will be using in addition to the written statement? The genre itself, what type of genre is it? So students will be asked to write an email, to be asked to write something on a blog, or versus writing an academic essay versus writing probably an online article. So, and of course, the decision to go for a specific genre would depend on the learning the course objectives or the learning outcomes of the course, or as I mentioned earlier, the content you're usually covering as part of these classes. And then how much you need to ask yourself how much time you need for the writing task. And this is something that's not done randomly. With experience, you would know the amount of time needed from your students to finish a specific task. Then scoring criteria. The problem that I see sometimes with teachers, they don't think about the scoring criteria until they're done with the assessments itself. So students would come to you and say, well, what are the scoring criteria you'll be using to assess our performance? Oh, I haven't decided on this yet. That should not be the case. And I'll talk later about the things that we can do. And then another issue, choice of tasks. And this is a question that I usually get from students and teachers. Is it better to give more than one task for students to choose from or not? I mean, and there is no straightforward response to that question. And research has shown that giving a choice doesn't make any difference in terms of performance. But if you feel that this is something that would help your students, go for it. But you have to be careful about the comparability of their performance. You need to make sure that the tasks are relatively similar, because eventually you need to compare the performance of students on these tasks. And then issues related to whether students will use handwriting or word processing or using computer to write their essay. Or is it okay for them to consult external sources, or like using a dictionary or using the internet while writing? So these are decisions you need to decide on while working on the writing task. One thing that, again, I find it very helpful in terms of designing writing activities and designing language exams in general. You need documentation. I feel like sometimes we don't do a good job when it comes to documentation of different decisions that we usually make as part of an assessment context. And that's why I strongly recommend using test specifications and have them in writing. So within a writing assessment context, it would be useful if you can develop your test specifications. So if let's say you're a team of 4 or 5 teachers teaching different sections of the same course, it would be nice to agree on the type of specifications you'll have for the writing task, and you work together based on the same document. By doing this, you make sure that you standardize the process itself. And also you have all the activities documented. So if someone, let's say next year, would come and look at the writing assessment practices, well, here's the document, look at our specifications. And instead of, depending mainly on kind of trial and error and passing the experience orally to other teachers, I find this a little bit difficult to handle within an assessment context. So for test specifications, you talk about how what type of content you're covering, the organization of the test itself, number of tasks you'll be giving. So writing, are you going to use 2 or 3 writing activities, time assigned to each task, specifications for each task, and then criteria, scoring criteria. And it would be also useful, especially for novice teachers, if you can provide some sample activities for them. So here are the specifications, give them the details, and then, well, here's a sample writing task that you can use while designing yours. Then, since we talked about the instructions and talked about the writing prompt, here is the writing prompt. And I'll give you like probably 15 seconds to read this. Done? So here is a prompt. How is that different from this one? Yes, it is. It is. But in terms of the instructions, how is that different? Let me say one thing. I mean, the prompt itself, it's the same. So I'm interested in the instructions that you're giving. So you will see different versions of the task, and the prompt will stay the same. Just to let you know. Yes, the length. And how do you usually state the length of the essay or the paragraph? Do you usually use the number of words or number of paragraphs or number of sentences? Just write in the chat box, please. Okay, number of words. Number of words for me. Okay, number of everyone. Great. Number of words. I'm really happy to see this, because sometimes I see examples where say, write 3 paragraphs, and I keep asking myself, what is a paragraph? Or write 10 sentences. What is a sentence? A sentence could be 3 words and could be 20 words. Okay. How is that different from the previous one? Let me show you the previous one. Here is revision number 1. Here is revision number 2. And I have the revised part in red, just to, so here we added what? We added okay, we added the scoring criteria. I have a comment that I'll go back later on too, but I'll move on, and I'll remind me during the question and answer session to talk about that. I think it's from Efrosini. Am I pronouncing I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. Okay. It's very important as part of the writing task to state or specify the scoring criteria, basically because students, they need to know how their performance will be scored. And one thing that I'd like to say when it comes to scoring criteria, stay away from technical terms. Like, if you look at the way that the different criteria have been stated here, your ideas are how well your ideas are explained. We didn't say development, basically because many of our students wouldn't know what development means. Or here, how you organize your essay instead of organization, or how you choose words instead of word choice or style, how to use grammar instead of saying syntax or accuracy. So my recommendation, if you're including your scoring criteria as part of the writing task, make sure that these scoring criteria are written in simple words. And we try our best to stay away from the jargon that we use. Great. I'm happy that you're in agreement with this. Here's the third one. If you look here, I mean, we need also to mention the time. Probably you move it up there, but I mean, at the end of the day, students need to know how much time they have. The time limit, exactly. Any other suggestions for this? I'm sure that there is always room for suggestions, things that you guys do as part of your activities, your writing activities. Maybe revision 4 or 5 or 6, I mean, depending on the suggestions you'll be giving. So if you're working, it seems that if you're working with kids, probably yes, you can provide some vocabulary items for scaffolding or supporting what they're doing, phrases that they need. I think this is helpful at lower levels. Definitely, that's a good suggestion. Again, vocabulary items, yes, at lower levels, that's helpful. So in a nutshell, let me say this one more time. You need to make sure that the students know the scoring criteria that you will be using. You need to make sure that they know the amount of, or the length, or how many words that they have to write. In terms also of lower level students, probably providing some scaffolding would be helpful as well. Okay, how you guys doing? So far, so good? Okay. Then, that's my favorite part. Those who know me, I mean, I really like, and most of my research is within the area of integrated writing assessment. So there are different task types that we use in a writing assessment context, and we have a couple of colleagues who work with IELTS or TOEFL. These are some examples of activities that we started seeing many teachers using worldwide. Reading to write, or what we call reading-based writing, or listening to write, or listening-based writing, graph-based writing. This is common in business writing, common in IELTS. Paraphrasing, summary task, integrated writing, discourse synthesis, source-based writing. So a lot of vocab, and I thought it would be useful. I assume that all of us are familiar with these different types of tasks. But one thing that I find it a little bit confusing, how to move from the specific to the more general concepts. And if we pick 3 of these, so we have reading-based writing, or reading to write, integrated writing, source-based writing. So the circle in yellow would include the most specific task, and the one in blue would be the general one. So if we wanna classify them from the more specific to the more general ones, which one would have here? Any thoughts? Again, please write your answer in the chat box. What's the most specific one that we should have here in the yellow circle? Source-based, right? Okay. Reading-based. Okay. Reading-based writing. Okay. Yes, that's the most specific task. Source-based, I'll talk about that. The one in yellow would be reading-based. What's next? Integrated or source-based? Say source-based, source-based. Okay. Let's see and let's discuss. Well, usually reading-based writing or listening-based writing or paraphrasing or summary tasks, these are the most specific activities, writing activities that we're usually working with. Then you move to integrated writing. Why integrated writing? Because when we talk about integrated writing, we talk about a writing task where students draw on mainly reading and listening materials while producing their own text. Why source-based writing is more general than integrated writing? Because source-based writing includes not only integrated activities or integrated writing tasks where students draw on reading and listening text to produce their text, but also they can depend on graphs, they can depend on pictures, and that's why source-based is more general than integrated writing. Because whenever we're talking about integrated writing, we're talking about writing activities that draw on mainly linguistic resources. Okay, let's is that clear? Comments, questions? Thank you. Okay. And since many of us work in a university setting, if probably you're sitting there asking why integrated activities, why integrated tasks? Many of these activities target academic writing at different fields. I mean, well, if you're talking about business writing, you're talking about medical writing, legal writing, most of these depend on sources. So in a university setting, if you think about, at my end, can you repeat what's, okay, I'll do. Source-based writing is just, in integrated writing, we depend on linguistic resources, mainly reading and listening sources. But source-based writing, you depend not only on linguistic resources. You can depend on graphs, you can depend on pictures, and that's any external source that you'd use to produce your own text could be classified under source-based writing, including integrated writing. I hope that's clear now. So if you look at the type of activities that we work on or students work on in a university setting, you talk about research paper, lab report, research proposal, essay, summary, book reviews, literature reviews, reaction to a reading, case study report. And if you look at these different activities, the common factor among all these different activities, these activities draw on external sources. So the students would need to consult external sources to be able to write such or produce a specific text. And that's why integrated writing is very important in academic settings in general. Here is an example. Like actually, this is something I got from one of my papers. So read this, and so that the topic is, some people believe that global warming is damaging our planet. Others believe that global warming is not a serious problem. Which point of view do you agree with? Why? Give reasons and support your writing with examples. And of course, students are usually provided with some reading or external reading sources to draw on while producing their own task. Okay. The integrated writing activities they're not without challenges. They're challenging, and some of the issues that we see with integrated writing have to do with plagiarism. Students sometimes they use ideas from external sources without giving credit to authors. So that's an issue we need to pay attention to. Sometimes students overuse the sources. Other students might not use the sources. They don't know even how to use quotations, how to use citation mechanics in general. Sometimes teachers don't pay enough attention to these skills, and that's why when students are offered a task where basically they're required to consult external sources, they don't know how to do it. And that's why it's very important for teachers to spend time talking about how to synthesize information from external sources while working on an integrated task. Okay. Scoring. Scoring criteria, as you know, we talked earlier about the different scoring criteria, and looking at this slide here is a list. Probably the main difference between working on a regular writing task versus an integrated task is source use. So in case of integrated activities, you need to make sure that your scoring rubric taps into source use or quality of source use. Bibliography is important. Yes, thank you. Okay. But the questions that we need to ask when deciding on scoring activity, what rubrics we should use? Would you use a holistic rubric or an analytic rubric? Do you have a preference for the rubric that you'll be using within your classroom setting? Do you usually use a holistic rubric or an analytic rubric? And yes, definitely scoring is quite demanding. Okay, so mainly using holistic, but sometimes you combine both. Okay. Is there a specific setting where I use a combination? Okay. Is there a specific setting where probably holistic would be more efficient, more useful, or analytic would be more useful? Depending on, yes, depending on what? Okay, for holistic scoring, usually if you have a final exam, would you go for a holistic rubric or an analytic rubric? The purpose of assessment, yes. So in a holistic, in a summative assessment context, or so if you have a final exam, probably it's a good idea to use a holistic rubric, basically because it's efficient, it saves time, and you're not really interested in sort of diagnostic information about your students. However, if you're collecting formative data, if you're using this test for formative purposes, probably an analytic rubric would be more useful because it would give you info about the type of areas that your students probably are good at and things that they need to work on. Yes, in high stakes exams, you usually use holistic because it's perceived as a summative tool in that context. I'm going to talk briefly about feedback, given the fact that this is a classroom assessment context and feedback is very important. With feedback, it's very important to clarify what good performance is. And sharing the scoring criteria, as I mentioned earlier, would be useful for students and would be helpful even if for peer assessment. So if you ask students to assess each other's work, probably sharing the scoring criteria and deciding what quality writing is would be helpful in that regard. Provide diagnostic information. I mean, it's not enough to say it's good and you move on it. So diagnostic information and details about the things that they need to work on would be useful. Try to involve students in terms of involving and not only involving, empowering students as well. And peer assessment and self-assessment are very helpful in that regard. For feedback, it's very important to focus on how students actually can close the gap between their current level or the current performance and the desired performance. And this is what feedback should focus on. So in a way, feedback should be learning oriented. You're helping students actually to develop, to improve, right? And hopefully this is something would motivate students and promote their self-esteem. And as you know, I mean, all of us know that, you know, we have different types of feedback. Teacher feedback, which is the most common. So teachers spend a lot of time giving feedback with the students. I find it helpful if teachers actually can let students be part of the feedback process. So peer feedback is helpful. So some teachers think that it's not useful, but if you provide them with adequate training, if you give them the tools needed to give feedback to each other, I think it would be very helpful, and also would because the workload for us as teachers is huge. So instead of spending most of your time giving feedback, probably if you can delegate this, if you can ask them to give feedback to each other, or to depend on technology mediated feedback, is things that I'll talk about in a minute. Okay, and here is a scale that you can use with peer feedback. Since I'll be sharing the slides with you guys, I'll let you look at this later, given that we don't have a lot of time. But I find it's helpful in terms of guiding the students through the different issues that they'd like to pay attention to while assessing a specific text or giving feedback to another colleague. Then for technology, this is a book that just came out, and it's really good. It talks about using technology in writing, in second language writing in general. The author is Mimi Lee, and she provides some resources for technology. I'm not sure if you you've used some of these, like Screencast and the Turnitin grade mark, or Zoom, or even Skype. So you can, or Audacity. I mean, I use Audacity from time to time, and it's I find it extremely helpful, basically, because instead of spending a lot of time typing and writing feedback, I find these different resources extremely helpful for giving oral feedback to the students. Or sometimes you can video record some of the comments that you have while working within the task, within the document itself. So you can record where actually you're giving feedback. If you're let's say correcting a specific word, or you want to highlight a specific word, so you can give the comment while sharing the text itself with the students. So these are some of the resources that I strongly recommend looking at. Okay, so you use screencasts, right? Great. For peer review tools, these are some of the tools that I recommend: PeerGrade and Turnitin Peer Mark. I'm not sure if you have subscription. If you don't have subscription to Turnitin, probably you can go for PeerGrade or Peer Receptive. So again, I'll leave the links to you to try and let me know. I'd love to know your feedback about these different tools. I'm currently working on a project on peer feedback, and so if you have comments on this, that would be great. The other thing, and this is probably the final part that I want to highlight, technology-mediated writing. We need to ask ourselves actually how technology will, or not will, but how technology is changing what we're testing. It's changing the type of activities they're working on. So we're moving actually from traditional writing activities to what we call multimodal writing. Multimodal writing, so you're using different modes. I mean, so while writing, probably now think about an academic poster that you're designing online. So you're using a combination of pictures and text and colors and a lot of features that you can use on computer could be included under that type of task. So I think multimodal writing activities are the future of what we do, not only in teaching writing, but also in assessing writing. Online collaborative writing, I keep thinking about Google Docs and how we can produce a text as a group. That provides a lot of opportunities and possibilities for us, but also it provides some challenges in terms of how we're going to assess collaborative writing. Then also, remember earlier we talked about using external sources, again, using Corpora now in terms of helping with writing or helping with assessment, helping with giving feedback. And that takes us to the final one, which is basically automated feedback. There is a lot of pressure on teachers nowadays in terms of the type of the amount of time needed to give feedback. So probably sending students to some of these websites to get some automated feedback. It's not the best, but it's improving. And the nice thing about it gives immediate feedback. And it refers students to other sources that they can count on. Here are some examples, again, from Mimi Lee. I'm not sure if you use the Criterion platform from ETS. This one, it includes not only the e-rater, but probably you've heard about e-rater, but it includes formative tools for giving feedback to students. You have to pay a specific fee to use the service as a class or as a school, but it's useful. The intelligent essay assessor, the right to learn, the Turnitin also has its own feedback features. Writing Pal, My Access. So these are again some links that you can look at to see how students can receive automated feedback on their own writing. And I'll end up with this because I find it very thought-provoking. The bond between technology and language use in the modern world should prompt all language professionals to reflect on the ways in which technology is changing the profession of English language teaching in particular. and applied linguistics as a whole. This is from Carl Chappell. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Atta Gebril. Seriously, we have seen a lot of elements included in assessment of writing. And there are a lot of questions, but we're running short of time. So, Thomas, Sophia, were you able to collect any questions? There was one. Let me start with that comment from, let me find it, Efrosini, I think.
Thank you all.
Because you didn't want to miss that. No, it's not this one. Let me find the other one.
Thank you.
Private language school teaching young learners. No, not this one. Oh. The issue we face is that learners need to be trained for writing tasks that are not the ones they need in their current everyday lives and have no experience about the tasks, I think. Hence, English teachers are often the first to teach. Sorry.
It's okay.
I missed it because it appeared on a very small screen that I couldn't catch it.
No worries. I mean, if the colleague who asked that question earlier can repeat it for us,
exactly.
that would be great.
Really wonderful.
So why don't you go ahead and ask the question again if you can't find it?
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Can
Hi.
you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
I can.
I'll ask the question orally since I've
Sure.
had connection problems and I've lost my question myself. I don't have access to the chat.
No worries.
Yes, the issue that we face in Grace is that language learning is very certification oriented. Everybody learns the language, not just for the sake of learning the language, but for the sake of getting some international certification. And children start learning a language at a very early age, which means that young learners are at a high level of proficiency and need to be taught complex writing skills, which do not belong to their sphere of interest and experience.
So basically, let me reiterate what you just mentioned. It seems that there is this discrepancy between what we would like our students to learn in class and what type of activities are usually included on our assessment tools.
Exactly.
Right? This is a very complicated issue, and I wish I had a very straightforward response to that question. The problem with this, I mean, you have different routes. Number one, I mean, we need to ask ourselves as teachers, well, what exactly would like our students to learn? What type of learning outcomes we have? And we try our best to have this compromise between the things that we need to teach to our kids and the things that they need to have on the exam. There is always this compromise, basically, because sometimes as teachers, we don't have the power to change assessment practices or to change the content of the exams, especially if these exams that are usually imposed by an external body. So my answer, let's reach that compromise, and hopefully eventually test developers will listen and try to somehow align their assessment tools to the skills we'd like to promote among our students.
Thank you.
I recently edited a book on learning-oriented assessment, and I really like this concept basically because it reminds us of our main job. Our main job actually is to help students learn, right? And hopefully assessment would be a tool that we can use to make learning happen. And that's why it's always, let's remind ourselves that our main job is to help students learn. Assessment should be part of this learning process. It should not be kind of far away of that objective. Because currently I feel in different assessment contexts, there is that tension between learning and assessment, and that should not be the case. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. And any other questions? I think we can have 2 more questions. I'm just checking the time. I don't want to keep you late.
Jay, I think I have one more from Antonio's question in the chat. Oh no, Antonio, would you like to take the speech to talk about it?
Yeah, I think the question is clear. Sometimes we have an analytic grid, and then we have to understand the scale points. I mean, what's the meaning of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And I think sometimes it is very difficult to write down very clear descriptors, because we need descriptors.
Yeah.
And I see we do some conventions.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to have your opinion on this. How we can write down very clear descriptors, because I face this problem in my work, and sometimes I find difficult to explain to my colleagues how they can discriminate the various points between them. I would like to hear your opinion, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very important point. With scoring rubrics, one of the things that I find extremely helpful is to involve teachers within the process itself. So if you're developing a task, if you're developing descriptors for different levels, make sure that you negotiate these different descriptors with teachers. Make sure that we as a group understand what it means to have level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And this is something that should be part of the rater training session that you organize for the teachers. The problem that I see in different instructional settings, schools would give the scoring rubric to teachers and ask them to use it without any training, as if that we end up having the same understanding and the same expectations for different levels and different descriptors. So it's very important for us to make sure, number 1, that teachers are involved from the very beginning. Number 2, to make sure that we negotiate the different descriptors and different levels. You know what? We're gonna disagree on things. We're gonna agree on things, but we're gonna disagree on things, and we'll make sure that we resolve these disagreements. And this is what we do as part of rater training. And one final thing that I want to talk about, these descriptors are not holy texts. You can change them. If we feel that they're not clear enough, if we feel that there is disagreement, if we feel that teachers are not buying into what we're talking about here, let's work on modifying these descriptors. So that's very important, because the problem also that sometimes you see schools insisting in adopting a specific rubric that's not suitable for your own context, and use it as is. One final thing I want to talk about, you have scoring rubrics with 5 levels, 6 levels, 7 levels. You need to ask yourself, why do I need 5 or 6 or 7? Would it be better if I have 3 levels? Would it be better if you have 4? So even the concept of how many levels we should have on a scoring rubric should be negotiated, and a decision should be made based on our assessment context and based on our needs. And the type of decisions we'll be making based on these different score levels. I hope I answered the question again.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So El Sadiq, let's get the last, and I also see Thomas. So let's these 2 be the last 2 questions of this meeting, and then we'll close. El Sadiq.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, no. How are you? Thank you very much for this talented brilliant presentation. Actually, it's very informative.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'd like to ask you about, what is called reliability of writing assessment. You know that in terms of internal or external or high stakes or top-down or a bottom-up assessment, there is a different factors or variables affect this kind of assessment in educational context.
Yeah.
Like educational context or curriculum itself, many factors affect. So how can we confirm the reliability of this kind of assessment in terms of writing and in terms of speaking? Thank you very much.
Oh boy, yeah, that's an excellent question. I mean, and I talked briefly at the beginning of my presentation. If you go back, the different variables that may contribute to a writing score or to a speaking score, to performance assessment in general. And we're trying our best actually to mitigate the effects of these variables in order to make sure that the performance we're getting, the text we're getting, is representative of the writing ability of the test taker. In terms of reliability, things that we need to check in order to enhance the reliability of writing scores. Number one, you need to make sure that you have quality scoring rubrics. So the scoring rubric is reflective of the issues you're tapping into as part of your writing assessment context. You need to make sure that teachers understand the scoring criteria. You need to organize rater training sessions, and it's not a one-time thing. It's something that you have to do regularly. Otherwise, because teachers might change, the scoring criteria might change from time to time. So you gotta make sure that you revisit these issues with teachers, and also you wanna you track how teachers work on as part of the scoring process. Because believe me, teachers, even after rater training, sometimes they go back and they do things the way that they like to do. And even research has shown that teachers have built-in scoring criteria. Even if you're giving them a scoring rubric, you're giving them rater training sessions, they always go back to the things that they're comfortable with. The things that are compatible with their own belief system. So these are some of the suggestions for, and of course, in terms of, you have issues that you need to pay attention to in terms of test administration procedures, because these can actually affect reliability. Also, in terms of task design, you need to make sure that you have clear instruction, all the things that we talked about earlier. So these, if we follow these different procedures, I think that can mitigate the effects of the external variables, and hopefully the score will be reflective or representative of the writing ability we're targeting.
Okay, last question for Mars, please.
Okay, thank you, Ece. I'd like to ask you, how far are we from automatic rating of writing? Then we go on with other languages.
That's a tough question. And honestly, I mean, I tend to have a relatively kind of, my take on automated assessment. I mean, we're getting there. But I always try to think about automated, not scoring, but also automated feedback as a tool for formative assessment. We use it in high stakes assessment, but it's a tool that I don't think we've done a good job in terms of using it for formative purposes. Let's use automated feedback, automated scores to inform our instructional practices, to provide diagnostic information for our students, and to track students' progress. And the nice thing I mentioned earlier about the immediacy, I mean, the students get immediate feedback based on these automated tools. If I think if we use it that way, I mean, to me, I think it's a fantastic formative assessment tool. In terms of high stakes testing, I mean, research has shown that inter-rater reliability between human raters and automated scores is relatively high. So I mean, we're getting there, and the algorithm is improving, and we're getting more and more data supporting automated scoring. But to me, I think the area that we need to work better, it has to do with how to use such automated tools, and I want to emphasize automated feedback, not just the score, the feedback, the qualitative feedback we get from these automated tools, how we use them for improving our own instruction.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, all the participants, guest experts. Thank you very much, Atta Gebril. Absolutely, it's apparent that we cannot get enough of Atta Gebril, so that we exceeded the time limit. Thank you very much for spending some extra time with us. Basically, thank you.
Thank you everyone for your kind invitation, for attending this session, for asking such wonderful questions. And I really enjoyed the session very much, and I look forward to meeting all of you in the future. And good luck with the wonderful job that you're doing with this project.
Thank you very much. Hope to see you maybe again on the following EBO, LAL EBO. So we will always have the pleasure. Sure. And as a close up, we're running towards week 4, where you will be evaluating and maybe designing the participant assessment tasks. So the guidelines are already uploaded, but the course content is not unlocked. So it hasn't, because we have still one more day to go. So at the end of this week, the week number 4 will be unlocked, and you will start working on assessment evaluation. So we cannot wait to see your evaluations as well. So thank you very much, everyone. It was a fantastic meeting. See you online or the next one. Other than that, see you on Canvas. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.